We hit a lot of big topics yesterday on the Morning Pitt when we went through sort of what to tell people when they ask you about Pitt, what we talk about when we talk about Pitt. We just sort of hit on a bunch of big topic, big storylines for Pitt entering the 2024 season and really covered a lot of bases. Everything, the offense, the defense, some key players, guys to watch, all this different stuff. But there were a lot of things we didn't actually touch on. You know, I'd like to go through the top 5 transfers who are going to get on the field this season, or top 5 freshmen who can make an impact, top 5 games of the year, that we're looking forward to the most. It'll make the biggest difference, or whatever it is. And we're actually right about a lot of that stuff on Panther-Lair.com. If you go check out the message boards now, I started yesterday publishing parts of I called it the Big Pitt Preview, because over the weekend I just sat down and started writing about Pitt and ended up about 5,000 words or so. And, it's sort of one of those decisions to make of, do you just post the entire opus in one place, or do you break it up into a bunch of smaller segments and get a little more conversation out of it that way? So I broke it up into smaller segments. I have more segments still to publish, like, top 5 freshmen or top 5 games or whatever it may be. I published the top 5 transfers, but there's still some other stuff to talk about. And it's the big picture. And we said here, the day before training camp starts, camp will start tomorrow. And you'll have 4 weeks of training camp before the season actually begins. And then, you have 3 months of the season. You'll see what that brings. But there's always the big picture that's looming out there. There's always the big picture that's lurking. And that's Pat Narduzzi and the Pat Narduzzi era at Pitt and his legacy at Pitt. And I know he said a couple, last week or whenever it was at the ACC football kickoff. And I agree with him that, nobody wants to talk about legacy after a 3-9 season, and that's understandable. Despite the fact that he's been at Pitt for 9 years, he's one of the longest tenured coaches in Pitt history, with that many seasons under his belt, 115 games coached. There aren't many Pitt coaches who have coached that many games and coached for that long. But nobody wants to talk about legacy when you're coming off a 3-9 season, understandably so. But there's still questions about it, because inevitably people will bring up the matter of whether or not Pat Narduzzi's on the hot seat this season. I just got asked a week or two ago by a national writer, like, hey, do you think Narduzzi's on the hot seat? And the answer is no. He's not on the hot seat this year. This is the year that could put him on the hot seat, but right now he's not on the hot seat. And quite frankly, even if he goes on the hot seat next year, he's still got a pretty long contract beyond next season, a couple of years that I'm not sure they'd be willing to buy out just quite yet. So I think Pat Narduzzi is several disasters away from the hot seat, on the field and off the field. I think there would have to be a combination of disasters on and off the field to truly get him onto the hot seat. So we don't need to go that extreme. But 9 years in, what has the Pat Narduzzi era been at Pitt? Let's take a big picture view of it, of what the last 9 seasons have brought, and see what that tells us about what we should expect this year, and maybe what you should, I don't want to say hope for from this year, but what you should expect, not just from this team, what can they do, but what you should expect from Pat Narduzzi in year 10 as a head coach at Pitt. Let's talk about Narduzzi's legacy. Let's talk about the Narduzzi era, and let's talk about the big picture here on the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. My son put on a podcast the other day, and I listened to a little bit of it with him, and God, we just kept waiting and waiting and waiting for the guy to get through the preamble and start actually talking about what the podcast was about. It was the worst thing. It was so annoying to have to sit through that stuff. Oh, well, like and subscribe. This is all we ever ask you to do. I don't ask you to pay any money for anything. I mean, we ask you to pay to subscribe to Panther-Lair.com if you want to get the real Pitt info and inside information and all of that. But this right here, all we ask you to do is like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, to get all of our Pitt video content. We have daily morning Pitt videos like this one. We will have lots of Pitt content coming out of training camp once it starts tomorrow, press conferences and interviews and all of those kinds of things. So we've got that coming to you. And then our weekly live show that we do tomorrow night. We do it every Wednesday night right here live at 8:30 p.m. on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have a lot of Pitt video content for you, and all I really ask is that you like this video and subscribe, and then head over and check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, for all of the latest Pitt sports coverage, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Panther-Lair.com. All right. Pat Narduzzi. 9 seasons of Pat Narduzzi football at Pitt. What have they brought? Overall record, 65-50. It's a .565 win percentage for Pat Narduzzi at Pitt. There have been some pretty incredible highs, and there have been some pretty incredible lows. On the whole, you go 65-50 over the course of 9 seasons. That's more or less a 7-5 record on average. It's like 7 point something and 5 point something. So somewhere around 7-5, 7-6, 8-5, somewhere around there. And that's where Narduzzi has been more often than not. 8-5, 8-5 his first 2 seasons, 8-5 again in year 5, 9-4 3 years after that, which is not far away from 8-5, 7-7 1 year, 6-5. He's only had 2 losing seasons in his 9. There was the 5-7 record in 2017 that culminated with that win over Miami at Heinz Field. Big win, huge win. It would have been a signature win for Pat Narduzzi if he hadn't defeated a number 2 ranked undefeated team a year prior on the road in a much bigger situation. But nevertheless, that year was a losing record, and then, of course, this past year. So I think if you start right there, all right, and we'll get into expectations for the program, what you should think Pitt should be capable of on an annual basis. But if you start right there, 7 out of 9 seasons, he has not lost more games than he won. So that's good, right? I mean, start the bar as low as you can set it, and that's where you set it. You say, well, do you have winning records? Are you avoiding losing records? And in 7 out of 9 seasons, he's avoided a losing record. That damn 2018 with the 7-7 record is screwing this whole thing up, where I just want to say 7 out of 9 seasons he's had a winning record. But he didn't have a winning record in 2018. They went 7-7. And that year, in a really interesting kind of way, it's a little bit of like a microcosm of the Narduzzi era. Not just what he's accomplished, but how we even talk about Pat Narduzzi and his time at Pitt. Because 7-7, I remember having these conversations after the 2018 season, throughout the offseason. This eternal debate of whether that season was a success or a disappointment. And it really depended on, you could choose. You could choose which side you believed. You could say, they won the Coastal and advanced to the ACC championship game. That's a success. That's a successful season. You could also say they went 7-7. That's a 500. That's a disappointment. This is not the Pirates we're talking about here, that if you get to 81 wins, you're happy. That's a 500 record. That is a disappointment. And both are true. Both are accurate. Because you can't even just say, well, they just had a really rough stretch to start the season, but then they rounded into form. I mean, that's true. But then they also had a really bad stretch to end the season when they lost to Miami, Clemson, and Stanford in the final 3 games. That season sort of sums up why it's so difficult to qualify the Narduzzi era. We can quantify it. He's 65-50. Nope. That's his record. That's what he's done. He's had, 7 out of 9 seasons when he's lost at least 5 games. That's what he's done. That's the reality. Okay? We can quantify it like that, but qualifying it gets a little trickier. Because you say, well, he's lost 5 or more in 7 out of his 9 seasons. Yeah, that's true. But you know what? The 4 years prior to him arriving, they lost 6 or more. Todd Graham went 6-7. Paul Chryst never did better than 6-6 in the regular season. 2 out of his 3 years, they went 6-7. One of the year, they beat Bowling Green in a bowl game to go 7-6. And the year before Todd Graham arrived, Dave Wanstead's last year, they went 8-5. So I look at it, and by comparison to what came before him, Narduzzi elevated the program. He did, up until his third year when he went 5-7. And there were understandable issues there. And the next year they still lose 7 games, but they win the Coastal. And you end up with this conflict of like, you're 7-7. I can't celebrate a 7-7 season. But it's really easy to refute that. Number one, you point to the Coastal Trophy. And you say, look at that. You won something. More than Dave Wanstead ever won. Walt Harris won the Big East once. I mean, Dave Wanstead got a share of the Big East, whatever, in 2010 or something like that, or he didn't get the BCS bowl bid. He didn't actually win the conference. And when the opportunity was presented to him multiple times that year, they fell short. They failed to do so. They failed to win it. So winning the Coastal right there is an actual legitimate piece of hardware. A trophy. And to do so, and this was the easiest argument to make of all time. Because throughout that offseason after the 2018 season, there was this narrative that Pitt backed into the championship game. Backed into the ACC championship game. They didn't back into anything. They won their way in. In 2004, when Pitt went to the Fiesta Bowl after winning the Big East, they backed their way in. Now, not taking anything away from that team. That team won a lot of games. And that team worked really hard and lifted itself up into that, put itself in a position to go to the Fiesta Bowl. But they needed like 3 other outcomes or something to happen that last weekend just to get there. That was backing in. That was winning like a 4-way tie or whatever it was. This team in 2018 beat Syracuse, a ranked Syracuse team in overtime, beat Duke, went on the road. I think Virginia was ranked, I believe, that Friday night game down there. And if they weren't, they were considered to be a good team. And that was a game that was a big game in terms of the Coastal. And they kicked the crap out of Virginia Tech. And then they went to Wake Forest with an opportunity to clinch the Coastal, and they got it done. How many games did I just say? Syracuse, Duke, Virginia, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest. They won 5 ACC games in a row. The Notre Dame game was in the middle there. I think it was between the Syracuse game and the Duke game. And that was one where they battled far more valiantly than you ever expected them to. And you actually came out of that feeling kind of okay about a loss. But they won 5 ACC games in a row to take the Coastal, to win it. And you can't take anything away from that. You can't disparage that. No matter what you want to say about, well, they lost to Penn State 51-6, or they got killed down at UCF, or they lost their last 3 games of the season. Yeah, that's all true. Those things are all true. But just as much as that is true, it's also true they won 5 conference games in a row to win the division. They took hold of the ACC, Coastal Division, that year. And you can't take that away. That's an accomplishment for Narduzzi. As much as some of these other things are a knock on him, that's an accomplishment. And something you have to say that, look, that team was in a bad way. They were in a bad way when they went into that Syracuse game. Most Pitt fans were expecting them to lose. I think they were 2-3 at that point. And their losses were the disaster against Penn State, the disaster at North Carolina, the disaster at Central Florida. All they'd done was beat, I think, Albany and Georgia Tech. And now here's Syracuse, belle of the ball, coming in here. Well, they got no chance. And all they did was for the next 6 games play really, really well. And so, this is the conflict with Narduzzi, where you can have the best season in 40 years of Pitt football in 2021, and it's a year where they lost to Western Michigan. You could go the next year, they go 9-4. It was a good year. They get a nice win, a really nice win over UCLA in the Sun Bowl, and they also just completely pissed away the month of October. They lost to a team who fired its coach 4 days earlier. Had 3 red zone turnovers in a loss on the road in a conference game. This is what it has been. It's been befuddling and it's been head scratching, but damn if it hasn't been accomplished. Damn if there haven't been some big wins over the years. I made a list. I made a list of a lot of things here, but this is my list of big wins over these years. Penn State 2016. Whatever you want to say about Narduzzi, that was an awesome atmosphere and an incredible win. Clemson later that season. No matter what you say about Narduzzi, and even his most ardent haters have to agree that was incredible. The Miami game at the end of the 2017 season. You have to be pretty bitter to not have enjoyed that. I know I just listed a bunch of games in 2018. I don't know if I count any of them as signature wins. They were big wins. And there were some big wins in there. That Syracuse game, I think, was a springboard for the rest of the season. The Wake Forest game, they clinched the Coastal that year. And you know what? I will include that Wake Forest game in 2018. I'll tell you why. They went on the road. They went down there. And for about 5 weeks in a row, as Pitt was building momentum, there was always this chorus from Pitt fans of yeah, this is where they finally blow it. They're getting a lot of attention. People are starting to talk them up. This is when Pitt always falls apart. And every time they didn't fall apart. They went to Virginia, stepped up. They had Virginia Tech at home. This is the game. This is when it really... I'll believe it if they get this one. This is where they pull the football out. Nope. They beat the crap out of Virginia Tech. They go to Wake Forest. Well, this is where Pitt always falls apart. They got it's all there for them. They have an opportunity to actually accomplish something. This is where they always blow it. They didn't blow it. It was close at halftime, but I think they ran away with it in the second half. Kenny Pickett, I think, had a 300-yard game or something. They didn't blow it. They rose to the occasion. And I think for a program like Pitt, where a lot of times they have not risen to the occasion, I think it's worth celebrating those moments when they do. 2019, the UCF game. That was a hell of a win. I mean, you're beating a ranked team, number one, a team that embarrassed you a year ago, number two, although you did a lot to embarrass yourself down there, and you do it in incredibly dramatic fashion. I mean, that was a great atmosphere. It was a great game, and it was a great win. The Virginia game in 2021, when they clinched the Coastal. Huge win. Big, dramatic win. As a matter of fact, the North Carolina game that year, too. I mean, it was a big one. You could probably put North Carolina 2019 for the year they finally got off the hump, got off the schneid, got over the hump against North Carolina since, beating them for the first time since joining the ACC. But the Virginia game really in 2021 was an opportunity. It was all there for you. You win this game to actually accomplish something and clinch something, and they did it. They took care of business. And then a couple weeks later, they go to Charlotte for one of the biggest wins in the Narduzzi era to win the ACC. Oh, and they beat Tennessee that year, too. That was a huge win on the road. 2022, the return of the brawl. Huge win. Like a memory-making win. And that's what we're talking about here. Because I think if you've been following this program relatively closely over the past 10 years, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games I just mentioned, when I said them, you had a distinct memory pop. You saw the game. Either you were there or you were watching it on TV, but the memory of being there or watching it came back to you. It's a memory-making game. And there's been some bad memory-making games. But there's a lot of positive memory-making games. And then the Louisville game this year. This past season. Despite going 3-9, that's a huge win. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games. Throw in a couple of those Carolina games if you want. You got maybe 11, 12 games of positive memories, big wins, signature games. And the kind of things that you can still instantly recall what those games were, what it was like, and what you saw and observed and felt and experienced. And then there's some honorable mention games. Maybe the memories aren't quite as strong as those games I just mentioned. But there's some honorable mention games. Like Syracuse in 2015. Remember that? They're driving to try to go down and kick a field goal to win the game. 4th down at midfield, Ryan Winslow throws a pass to Matt Galambos. That was one of those eye-opening games. Okay, this dude Narduzzi, this is an interesting hire. This guy might be the right guy. Syracuse in 2018, like I said, was a springboard game that really boosted them forward. Virginia Tech in 2020. I always bring up this game Because that was a game where Pitt had like a ton of guys out for COVID exposure and close contacts or whatever it was. So many that they thought, like, why isn't this game getting canceled? And I don't know if anybody gave them a chance. And they went out and won like 44-14 or something like that. I mean, it's just like a gutsy win. Whatever you want to say. If you want to sit back and be like, he's lost 5 or more in 7 out of 9 years. Yeah, that's true. He's basically averaged 7-5, 7-6, 8-5. Yeah, that's true. You know, he's, coming off a 3-9 season. That's true. Like all those things are true and factual. Nothing you can say about it. Nothing I can argue about that. But I can say there's been a whole heck of a lot of good memories and positive outcomes from the last 9 years. And not too many of them happened last year. Only one happened last year. But there's been a whole lot over the past 9 years, including 2 Coastal Division championships and an ACC championship trophy. Those things matter. Those things count for a lot. And like, so, we come back and it's like the 7-7 season where it's like, yes, but they were only 7-7. Yeah. But they also stepped up, won some really gutsy games and seized the moment. But they lost 3 in a row at the end. Yeah. And they won 5 conference games in a row to take care of business. But they got blown out by Penn State, and they had the Carolina game and the UCF game. Yeah. Wait, I had another one to reply to that. Yeah. But they went in overtime against a ranked Syracuse team. They went toe-to-toe with Duke for like a 54-45 game. They had, Darren Hall and Quadriolus had the greatest dual running back performance in Pitt history against Virginia Tech. And they won the Coastal. Like 51-6, a Coastal trophy. This is what the Narduzzi era has been. And I'll leave you with this. Pat Narduzzi 65-50, second most wins of any Pitt coach in school history. Second most. I think Pop Warner won 60, Jackie Sherrill won 50, Jock Sutherland 111, 20-12. What a success rate for Jock Sutherland. 818 win percentage. Jackie Sherrill's the all-time leader in win percentage at Pitt, 842. Jock Sutherland's right behind him at 818. Narduzzi 65-50, a win percentage of 565. Just a shade over 500. You know what Pitt's all-time win percentage is? They're 761, 560, and 42 is their record. 761 wins, 560 losses, 42 ties. Pitt's all-time win percentage, 574. Narduzzi's, 565. I meant to look this up. Prior to this past season, when Narduzzi was 62-41, his win percentage was 602. He's hovering right around Pitt's all-time win percentage. Pitt's 574, Narduzzi's 565. Prior to this last season, he was 602. All right in that same range. Pat Narduzzi, he is Pitt. Because if you look over the history of Pitt, there have been incredible highs and incredible accomplishments, and then just befuddling, unbelievable moments. There's the Larry Fitzgeralds and the Aaron Donalds and the LaShawn McCoys and the Darrelle Revises and so on, and back through the 90s and the 80s, the post-Sherrill years of all the talent that has played for this team and this program. And they still end up being a 574 program. All-time win percentage. And Larry Fitzgerald, for as great as he is, and I think he's the GOAT, played on a couple, a 9-win team and an 8-win team. Aaron Donald played on an 8-win team and 3 6-win teams. LaShawn McCoy was on a 5-win team and a 9-win team. Darrelle Revis, I think his first year was 04. So they won 8. But his second year they won 5, and his third year they won 6. Incredible highs, stupefying lows. That's been Pitt. That's been the Pat Narduzzi era. and probably the safest prediction for this year, something I've come to repeat this summer pretty often, is they'll probably go 8-5 this year. Whether that's 7-5 beating an Eastern Michigan in a bowl game, or 8-4 and losing to a Northwestern in a bowl game. That's probably who they'll be. That's probably where they'll end up. And that's largely what Pat Narduzzi has been. It's who he has been. It's what this program has been under him. Now, a whole other discussion for a different 25-minute podcast would be whether that's good enough for Pitt. But with an all-time win percentage of .574, it's right around the range where they are. Narduzzi is Pitt, and he's a fit for Pitt, for the good and the bad. All right, tomorrow we'll have our full training camp preview as training camp gets started, and then we'll have all kinds of coverage from the South Side. Really looking forward to getting back down there and seeing what's going on in at Pitt's facility, in the outdoor practice fields in the South Side. It should be fun, long, hot August. Going to have a lot of football action to report on right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe. And then, of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all of your Pitt sports coverage. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Really appreciate it. Hope you had a great start to your week yesterday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the first day of training camp right here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.